The gate clanged like a gunshot dust hanging in the summer heat, while a sheriff's cruiser rolled over the hill with lights blazing. And on the wrong side of my new steel fence sat two kids with melting popsicles, while their mother, Karen, screamed like I'd stolen a playground. And I remember thinking, this is my non-HOA driveway, my road, my land, yet somehow I'm the villain in her show. You know what I mean? She'd pushed them through like my yard was a community amenity, and then tried to follow. But the lock I'd installed last week caught the bars closed, and the whole scene froze like bad reality TV. Me with a hand on the latch. The sheriff smirking neighbors, filming from porches, while cicadas droned, and Karen threatened to call everyone from the county inspector to the mayor, even though the sheriff was right there already. He glanced at my private property sign at the notarized deed in my folder, raised an eyebrow that said, "We both know what this is." And when he asked if the kids were safe, I pointed to the shade tree. The dog lying at their feet, the hose running like a little fountain, and said I'd open the gate once their mother stepped back and stopped yelling, which made her shout hostage and heartless and all kinds of theater, while the kids just sat there confused, turning their popsicle sticks over like tokens from a game they didn't sign up to play. That was the opening scene. Months of letters about community alignment drones buzzing low to assess landscaping. An HOA president who believed that if she said my place belonged to them, enough times it would become true. And me finally tired of being neighborly to someone who treated boundaries like suggestions. So I welded a gate, ran a cable, checked the lock twice, and learned the sound it makes when entitlement hits steel. The sheriff kept it dry. This is private property. HOA has no jurisdiction here, and when I held up the stamped deed showing I owned the house and the road up to it, her jaw twitched because the script where she wins with volume had just slipped out of her hands. And after a long beat, she took 2 steps back. I clicked the remote. The gate opened just enough, and her kids shuffled out like ducklings, cheeks red, while somebody's phone zoomed in, and a delivery truck slowed to watch the final shots of Act 1. That night, I told myself the gate was only the first domino, because with someone like her, it always is, so I went to the diner with a friend who knows county records better than most. And over greasy burgers, we spread old maps, traced parcel lines with a pen, and found a thin ribbon of land, a forgotten easement, where the HOA's main access road crossed a sliver. I own not a cudgel, but leverage the kind you put in a file and keep dry for when the weather turns. The weather turned quick. An inspector in a polo with no county credentials tried to walk my property. Got a polite goodbye and a spot in the sheriff's log letters, kept arriving with bureaucratic poetry about harmonizing standards. And I started building my own paper trail. Short factual replies with deed and zoning attached copies to the sheriff and county attorney cameras, screwed into posts with night vision blinking like quiet sentries, footage rolling to the cloud, time-stamped, labeled archived. A neighbor who'd had enough slid me HOA minutes, Karen's handwriting in the margins about acquiring my property and playground plans, and I tucked them in my safe because truth without proof is just noise, and I'd had enough noise to last a lifetime. Then came the demand letter from a law office 2 towns over, heavy on accusations of detaining minors and failing community safety norms, light on jurisdiction, ending with a request for arbitration for a non-HOA homeowner. Yeah, that happened. And I replied once certified denying jurisdiction with documents attached, and watched their second letter arrive shorter and less sure. Meanwhile, she staged little shows walking her kids to my fence, at the same time every afternoon, kicking a ball for the camera, trying to bait me into a clip she could edit. And I stayed inside while the cameras did the talking, because silence has a way of making a lie echo. Her biggest stunt was a bullhorn, and flyers accusing me of blocking emergency access and harboring dangerous livestock, which the deputy shut down with a citation for disturbing the peace, and that flyer went in the archive. 2, alphabetized between D for drones and F for fake inspector. And when a local reporter called asking if I'd go on record if it escalated, I said maybe because people like Karen don't quit. They double down until something snaps. The twist came on a heavy Saturday when she tried a drop-off, kids with towels sprinting toward my pond while her SUV sat idling like an escape car, and the gate timer clicked shut at 9 on the dot, trapping them on my side again, except this time I was already filming on the porch. Voice comm date, and time spoken out loud camera. At the lock, then at her, then at the kids under the shade, petting my dog like he was a cloud that wandered in from the next field. The sergeant who arrived wore mirrored sunglasses, and patience flipped through the folder I keep for moments like this. Trespasses letters, the easement clarification, and when he asked the kids if they were okay, they waved like campers, which made Karen pivot to goats and hazard and drowning. And he wrote her a notice, warning the next incident could be criminal. Told me to keep backing up the footage, and as rain started to patter on the gate, I thought maybe this is how you win a fight you never wanted, by letting every lie trip over its own shoelaces while the camera records the fall. After that, the county inspector came with 2 cruisers in tow, polite and precise, measured my clearances, checked my paperwork, and told Karen in a voice you reserve for toddlers and bullhorns that HOA rules. Don't cross onto my deed. Compliance confirmed, case closed, and a deputy actually laughed when she tried to say her kids were traumatized by seeing goats. Which was the moment I realized humor is a kind of law, too. It shrinks what doesn't hold up. The county attorney wrote asking for my statement. The reporter's draft hit my inbox with a headline about HOA overreach meeting a locked gate, and for the first time in months, I set my coffee down without bracing for the next knock, because the story wasn't just mine anymore. It had moved into rooms where volume doesn't matter. Then she filed her emergency injunction to force me to restore community access, and I walked into that little county courtroom with a battered briefcase like a man carrying lunch instead of proof, because the judge only needed 2 questions. Does the HOA have jurisdiction over a non-HOA property? Do you have an easement document? And when their answers were none and no, he dismissed it with prejudice, warned about sanctions for abusing the process. And outside in the hallway, the reporter asked me for a statement, and I said the simplest thing I could say. The law works. The sheriff's office called later about a restraining order, asked me to testify to the pattern, and by Friday evening, a process server handed Karen papers while she trimmed roses outside the clubhouse. Someone filmed it from a porch. Neighbors texted me. Congrats and jokes about how quiet the street suddenly sounded. Laughed about the goat gate, and a few HOA board members started whispering about liability and removal, because when the music stops, seats get scarce. I didn't gloat, didn't post, didn't spike the ball. I planted a row of trees along the fence, fixed the barn. Roof walked the dog at dusk, while the goats chewed the day down to silence and let the cameras hum softly, like crickets that never sleep. Because peace is not the absence of noise, it's the presence of proof. The ending came almost gently, a neighborhood barbecue to thank the folks who stood with me, folding tables in the shade, kids feeding the goats through the inner fence music low and easy, and an SUV rolled up slow windows down. Karen pale and stiff, stopping outside the restraining line, with a white envelope in her hand. Voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. She said it was a final statement. Left it on the post, stepped back, and inside were the photos she'd weaponized. A signed letter of resignation and a short note admitting my property is private, and she'd acted without authority. And the whole yard let out a breath like a balloon slipping from a child's fingers. Not a cheer, more like an exhale that had been stuck for months. She drove away without a speech. The reporter later called it closure, but I think it was something simpler. The way stubborn weather finally breaks, the way a gate becomes a line, and a line becomes a story people can stand behind. I still check the locks at night. Still back up the footage, not in fear, but in stewardship, and when I sit on the steps listening to the crickets. I hear the soft chorus of neighbors who used to watch from behind curtains and now wave with both hands. And I think about how the loudest part of this whole mess wasn't the yelling. It was the click of a lock and the quiet of a judge reading a deed. And if that sounds boring to you, then you've never needed calm to save your life. That's my story. A locked gate, a patient paper trail, a sheriff who kept showing up, a community that learned the difference between rules and reach. And if you've dealt with HOA overreach or a neighbor who thinks your yard is theirs, tell me below, argue with me. If you need to share what worked or didn't, because boundaries matter. But how we defend them matters more, and I'm listening.